First of all, what the outcomes will be, but what's really going on in the mind of the person who has committed these crimes. And unfortunately, unlike the movies, the police are expected to make rational decisions. If we make irrational decisions and we're driven by emotion rather than some substantive thought and planning before we act, we're going to be held accountable, and justifiably so. So sometimes it seems agonizingly slow to people, particularly when it's their loved ones whose lives are on the line. But from our perspective, our first initiative, our first goal is to safeguard lives. There is nothing else that takes precedence over that. It's to safeguard lives.
I know that Colleen, after I jumped, was still in the house, and eventually she dragged herself out miraculously out of the house because she was wounded. He shot her quite a few times, I don't know how many times.
Mrs. Simmons came out of the house after taking multiple gunshots at point-blank range and collapsed in the driveway bleeding. There was blood all over, and she just collapsed there. Within minutes, the paramedics came, and as I said, they were terrified. And they took Colleen, and they quickly tried to get her out of harm's way. We were far away, but you know, when you're confronted with a gun, everything changes.
Simultaneously with containing this house, we also had to begin evacuating people in the surrounding houses. We had to close off roadways. We had to direct fire personnel. Other police agencies were beginning to respond. We had called out for an armored personnel vehicle in case we would have had to have used that either to extricate victims or to possibly to storm the house at some point in time. So all of this was happening simultaneously. We had to assume the worst, that he was deranged, or he was so overwhelmed with hatred and possibly even take one of these children hostage and using them as some sort of a means to try to effect his escape. So we didn't know any of this at that point, but we had to assume the worst.
I then realized right away, at that point, I was put in an absolutely helpless and powerless position, and my children were out of my reach, and I knew that I had to cry to God now for help, and something that, you know, I thank God because we had always had a system in place of prayer in our home, and I knew the phone number of our prayer partner. I ran to the next door neighbor and told her, please start to pray and get everybody you can to pray, because my children are now in the house and they won't let us in, and they are alone in the house. I waited what seemed like forever, thinking about my two little ones. And then I heard the police radio say, there's two little children on the porch.